The fluorescent lights of Metro Tech Solutions conference room seemed particularly harsh that morning. I adjusted my blazer, still a bit loose after my 3-month hospital stay, and tried to focus on my boss Richard Thompson's face as he delivered what he clearly thought was my professional eulogy. Performance issues, extended absence, company priorities. The words floated around me like leaves in autumn. But I wasn't really listening. Instead, I was thinking about the irony of it all. How just 6 months ago, I had landed MetroTech its biggest medical technology contract in history, the very contract that had eventually saved my life. My name is Emily Chen, and at 34, I never expected to be both a cutting-edge biomedical engineer and a cancer survivor in the same year. But life has a way of writing stories we never see coming. Are you even listening, Emily? Richard's sharp tone cut through my thoughts. His perfectly pressed suit and manicured nails screamed of the success he built on others' work, my work. Yes, Richard, I understand perfectly. My voice was calm, steadier than I expected. You're terminating my position due to my extended medical leave. He smiled, that practiced corporate smile that never reached his eyes. Let's call it a mutual parting of ways. Your condition has clearly impacted your ability to maintain the standard of excellence MetroTech demands. Around the conference table, my colleagues, people I'd worked alongside for 5 years, suddenly found their notebooks fascinating. All except Jessica from marketing, who couldn't quite hide her smirk. She'd been gunning for my project director position since day one. Your medical leave has cost the company significant delays, Richard continued, warming to his theme. The Morgan Hospital contract alone has been proceeding exactly on schedule. I interrupted quietly, as per the weekly reports I submitted from my hospital bed. Richard's jaw tightened. He hated being interrupted. Reports that needed extensive revision and oversight. Jessica has been instrumental in keeping things on track. Ah, there it was. Jessica's smirk widened into a full smile. I thought about the nights I'd spent in my hospital room, laptop balanced on my knees, refining the neural interface algorithms for the new surgical guidance system. The nurses had scolded me, saying I needed rest. But the work had given me purpose during the darkest days of my treatment. Of course, I said, reaching for my laptop bag. I'll clean out my office immediately. That would be best. Richard stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Security will escort you. Standard procedure, you understand. As if I might what? Steal the technology I'd invented? The irony would have made me laugh if it weren't so painful. I was halfway to the door when it swung open and my heart nearly stopped. Dr. Catherine Morgan, Chief of Surgery at Morgan Memorial Hospital and our $50 million contract holder, stood in the doorway. Her elegant gray suit contrasted sharply with the memory I had of her in surgical scrubs, leaning over me 4 months ago, telling me they'd caught the cancer just in time. Emily. Her warm smile froze as she took in the scene. The security guard, my laptop bag, Richard's carefully blank expression. I hoped I'd find you here. I wanted to discuss the neural response modifications you suggested during your last treatment session. They're absolutely brilliant. Richard's head snapped up. Treatment session. Dr. Morgan's eyebrows rose. Yes, Emily didn't tell you. She refined the entire surgical guidance interface during her chemotherapy. Said all that time in the scanner gave her new insights into neural mapping. She turned to me. Those modifications you suggested, they've reduced surgical error rates by 47% in initial trials. The medical board is astounded. The silence in the room was deafening. I could practically hear the gears turning in Richard's head as he realized what he'd done, what he'd lost. Emily was just, he began, being fired. I finished for him. For taking too much medical leave, while redesigning your surgical system. During my cancer treatment, at your hospital, each period felt like a nail in Richard's professional coffin. Dr. Morgan's warm smile turned arctic. Is that so? She placed her briefcase on the conference table with deliberate care. Well, that's fascinating timing, considering I came here today to discuss expanding our contract. The medical board was so impressed with Emily's innovations. They wanted to implement the system across our entire hospital network. $100 million deal minimum. Jessica's smirk had vanished. Richard's face had gone from red to white so fast it was almost impressive. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office, he suggested weakly. Oh, I don't think that will be necessary. Dr. Morgan's voice could have frozen hydrogen. Emily, would you join me for coffee? I believe we have a great deal to discuss about your future, and Metro Tech's future too, though that may need to be discussed with my lawyers present. I stood there for a moment, looking at the faces around me. These people who had been my colleagues, who had watched me work myself to exhaustion building something revolutionary, who had said nothing as I was cast aside. I'd love to, I said, shouldering my laptop bag. I know a great place just down the street. As Dr. Morgan and I walked out, I heard Richard's voice, slightly desperate. Emily, wait. But I didn't wait. I didn't look back, because sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about moving forward, about taking your brilliance somewhere it will be truly valued. And as Dr. Morgan and I stepped into the elevator, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored walls. I looked different than I had 6 months ago. Thinner, yes, but also stronger somehow. More certain. You know, Dr. Morgan said as the doors closed, I'm not just interested in buying your technology. I'm interested in building something entirely new, something that could change medical technology forever. She paused, studying me. How would you feel about starting your own company? I smiled, thinking about all the ideas I'd sketched out during those long nights in the hospital. Ideas that went far beyond what Metro Tech could ever envision. I think, I said carefully, that would be exactly what the doctor ordered. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and with them, opened the first chapter of my new story. Richard and Metro Tech were already fading into the past, becoming nothing more than a reminder that sometimes our worst moments can lead us to our greatest opportunities. But this was just the beginning. As Dr. Morgan and I walked out into the bright morning sunlight, I knew that the real story, my story, was just beginning to unfold. 6 months after walking out of Metro Tech's glass doors, I sat in a very different conference room. The furniture was secondhand, the walls needed painting, but the energy in the space crackled with possibility. Around the table sat my newly formed team, brilliant minds I'd handpicked, people chosen not just for their expertise, but for their integrity. The initial trials at Morgan Memorial are exceeding all expectations. Dr. Sarah Wong, my head of clinical research, reported. Her eyes sparkled with excitement as she pulled up the latest data. The enhanced neural mapping system is showing a 63% improvement in surgical precision. We're revolutionizing microsurgery. I smiled, remembering how Richard had once called these same innovations unrealistic and too ambitious. Now, Neurovision Medical Technologies, my company, was making them reality. But success never comes without resistance. My phone buzzed with an incoming email, and my smile faded as I read it. Metro Tech's lawyers? Asked Michael Torres, our legal counsel. He'd been handling the increasing stream of threats and challenges from my former employer. I nodded. They're claiming ownership of the neural interface patents, saying they were developed while I was their employee. But that's not, Sarah began, indignant. True? I finished. No, it's not. Every innovation in our current system was developed during my medical leave, after they'd already begun the termination process. And more importantly, I pulled out a thick folder I kept secure since my hospital days. I documented everything, every idea, every line of code, time-stamped and witnessed by the hospital staff. Michael grinned. They have no idea what they're walking into, do they? Before I could answer, my assistant rushed in. Emily, you need to see this. She handed me her tablet, open to a tech industry news site. The headline made my blood boil. Metro Tech announces revolutionary neural surgery system. Below was a photo of Richard and Jessica at a press conference, standing proudly before a system that looked suspiciously like an early prototype of mine, the one I'd left behind. They're trying to beat us to market, Sarah said, reading over my shoulder, with an inferior copy of your work. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt an odd sense of calm. They're desperate, I said. They know we're close to FDA approval. They're trying to undermine us before we can launch. What do we do? Asked James Chen, our head of development. He'd left a cushy job at a major tech firm to join my startup, believing in my vision. I stood up, walking to the whiteboard where we'd mapped out our development timeline. We don't change a thing. We stay focused on building something better. I turned to face my team. They're fighting the last war. We're creating the future. The next few weeks were intense. While MetroTech made splashy announcements about their innovative system, we quietly continued our work. Dr. Morgan's hospital network provided invaluable real-world testing opportunities, and each success strengthened our position. Then came the day that changed everything. I was in the lab, fine-tuning the neural response algorithms, when Dr. Morgan called. Her voice was urgent. "Emily, how quickly can you get to the hospital? We have an emergency case, a young girl with a brain tumor. The conventional surgical approach is too risky." I glanced at the prototype we'd been testing. The system isn't fully certified yet. The FDA has granted emergency approval for this case. The family's desperate. They've heard about our trial results. 2 hours later, I stood in Morgan Memorial's advanced surgical suite, watching as Dr. Morgan used our system to navigate through the delicate tissues of 8-year-old Sophie Martinez's brain. The neural interface provided unprecedented precision, showing pathways and dangers invisible to the naked eye. The surgery lasted 9 hours. When Dr. Morgan finally emerged, her smile told us everything we needed to know. "Complete success," she announced to the waiting family. "The tumor is gone, with minimal impact to surrounding tissue." As the parents wept with joy, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Dr. Morgan. "This," she said quietly, "is why we do what we do." The success story spread rapidly through the medical community. While MetroTech was holding press conferences, we were saving lives. Other hospitals began reaching out, asking to be part of our trials. Then came the morning of MetroTech's big product launch. I was surprised to receive an invitation. Clearly a power play on Richard's part, a chance to show off his victory. I decided to attend. The hotel ballroom was packed with media, investors, and medical professionals. Richard took the stage, confident as ever. "Today, MetroTech revolutionizes surgical technology," he began. I sat quietly in the back, watching as he demonstrated their system. It was exactly what I feared, a rushed, superficial copy of my early work. As he walked through the features, I could see the flaws, the corners cut, the safety issues they hadn't even recognized. During the Q&A, a hand raised in the middle of the room. "Dr. Thompson, could you address the safety concerns raised by the Medical Technology Review Board?" Richard frowned. "What concerns?" Dr. Catherine Morgan stood up, commanding the room's attention. "The board's analysis found critical flaws in your neural mapping system. The same flaws, interestingly, that Emily Chen identified and solved months ago, after you fired her." The room erupted in murmurs. Richard's face reddened. "Those claims are unsubstantiated." Actually, another voice called out, Dr. Wong, standing by the door, "They're extensively documented. We've submitted comprehensive safety studies to the FDA comparing your system's approach with our corrected methodology." "Your system?" Richard sputtered. That was my cue. I stood up. "Yes, Neurovision's system, the one that just saved Sophie Martinez's life last week. The one that's already been approved for expanded trials across 6 major hospital networks." The room's attention shifted to me. Foams came out as reporters recognized the story unfolding before them. "Would you care to explain the differences between the systems?" asked a journalist in the front row. I walked to the stage, each step measured and confident. Richard had no choice but to step aside. For the next 20 minutes, I walked through the technical details, the safety innovations, the real-world results. I didn't need to attack MetroTech's system, but flaws were self-evident in comparison. In conclusion, I said, medical technology isn't about being first to market. It's about being best for patients. Every innovation in our system comes from real experience, including insights gained during my own battle with cancer, a battle that MetroTech considered too inconvenient to accommodate. The silence in the room was deafening. Then, from the back, someone began to applaud. The sound spread until it filled the ballroom. I looked at Richard, standing forgotten at the side of the stage. He wouldn't meet my eyes. In the weeks that followed, MetroTech's stock took a significant hit. They withdrew their system for further development. Jessica resigned. Richard was quietly moved to a less visible position. But I barely noticed. I was too busy building something that mattered. 1 year to the day after my firing, I stood in our new headquarters, a renovated research facility with state-of-the-art labs and a view of the city. Dr. Morgan had become our board chair. helping guide our expansion into new areas of medical technology. Our team had grown to over 100 people, each chosen for their brilliance and their heart. On my desk sat a frame containing my original termination notice from MetroTech, next to a recent headline: Neurovision Technologies Revolutionizes Surgical Care. CEO Emily Chen named Medical Innovator of the Year. But my favorite moment came later that week, during a routine surgery using our system. As I watched from the observation room, a young resident turned to me and asked, "How did you even think of this approach?" I smiled, remembering those long nights in the hospital when what seemed like the end of my career had actually been the beginning of something far greater. Sometimes, I told her, the best innovations come when you're forced to see things from a completely new perspective. And as I watched our technology help guide another successful surgery, I realized that the greatest revenge against those who try to diminish you isn't proving them wrong. It's soaring so far beyond their limited vision that they become nothing more than a tiny footnote in your story of success. The lawsuit from MetroTech was eventually dropped. They couldn't fight against the overwhelming evidence and public opinion. Richard, I heard, started a consulting firm, though he carefully avoids any mention of his time overseeing medical technology development. As for me, I recently approved our company's new policy: unlimited medical leave for any employee battling serious illness, with guaranteed job protection and flexible work arrangements. Because sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead us to our greatest accomplishments if we're just given the chance to prove it. Dr. Morgan still teases me about that day she walked me from the sideline. Best timing of my career, she says. I disagree. The timing wasn't lucky, it was inevitable. Because sooner or later, truth and talent will always rise to the surface. The trick is to keep believing in yourself long enough to see it happen. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at a major medical technology conference. The topic? Innovation through adversity: how personal challenges drive professional breakthroughs. I accepted immediately. After all, I have quite a story to tell.